Booktube, it's Angie. First off, please excuse the sort of disarray of books behind me. I've been doing a lot of reading challenges this month or the last couple months, and books go on the shelf and then they come off and then they get rotated because I'm looking for other books. Some of those stacks, they just get put in a stack and left there for a minute because I feel like I'm going to get to them pretty soon. So they're all in transition to finding set places. So there's going to be a little bit of a disaster behind me for a while, but that's all right. It's books. Book disaster. It's good. So this video is in response to a few days ago. Janie at the Bookworm's Buddy did one of her Tuesday talks, and she brought up the topic of dating non-readers, and I really liked her video on it. And then I saw Tiffany at the Crafty home did a video on it, and she brought up a lot of interesting talking points with her experiences, and so this is just a response to that. Not one of those like negative, let me tell you what I think YouTube response videos. This is all good. I'm just sharing my experiences because I thought it was a cool topic to talk about. I was just kind of like organizing my thoughts a little bit. So my experiences with dating non-readers, pretty much every guy, bar like maybe one, before I met my husband, was a non-reader. In my home, reading and books and libraries, it was all a huge thing. My grandparents and my parents are both college educated. We always had books around, but even to this day, Grandma has stacks of books around her house that she's still going through, and she's like, I forget, like 87 or something now, and totally still kicking and healthy, lives by herself, still is a really good driver, and she acts like she's 60. But yeah, she still has a million books she wants to go through, and she's working her way through them. And that got passed down to my mom. My mom was a huge book reader, still is. She reads different kinds of books than I do. She likes happy stories. She doesn't like things that end in sadness. So she reads all the like happy, fluffy romance things because she wants everybody to work it out in the end. And I don't necessarily need that. I just need it to be written well. But just having books around was the important thing. And then I guess when she met my dad was a big reader. My dad was very into educating himself and reading a lot of nonfiction and thought-provoking books and things like that. He would always seem to be seeking something. And so we had a really good mix of books growing up, and my parents never barred us from anything. It was just whatever on the shelf, you can read it. So I had a pretty wide selection to choose from because my parents were always going to book sales and library sales and thrift shopping the books and all that, and I guess that's where I got it from. So all this is their fault. Generational book hoarding. So yeah, when I got into school, it was a newsflash to me that wasn't everybody's home experience. I went to school with a lot of kids who weren't readers. Their parents didn't push it. And I quickly got labeled a book freak. I was the one that always had a book in the backpack. And it did affect my dating life a little bit, I think, when I got into my dating years. I had a lot of like brief flirtations in school, but I only had one very short-lived relationship, high school boyfriend. And it was over quick, and then that was the only serious guy I dated in high school. And I didn't date again till probably good 4 or 5 months after I graduated high school. And the first guy out of high school definitely wasn't a reader at all. He was very much into football and hunting, and which is all good. I don't have a problem with guys that like that sort of thing. I just wish the books might have been just a little bit there, a little bit. But I am a sucker for guys that can crack me up, because a lot of times I'm like, yeah, you're funny, but not really. And so when I come across guys that honestly can make me laugh, like just belly laugh, then no, I'm a sucker for it. And this first guy out of high school, he was a joker. He had some good jokes, and so I overlooked a lot of character flaws just because he could keep me laughing for a little while, and then I wasn't laughing after a while. And then that pattern sort of continued for the majority of my dating life. I always go back to the John Waters quote. I wish I had it tattooed on me so I wouldn't forget it. And that should just be a life motto. And now I pass that on to everyone. It's a good rule of thumb. If you don't see books in their house, don't do it. But it took me a long time to figure that out. Yeah, I overlooked a lot for a lot of years because I was glazed over with, oh, he's so funny. Oh, he has a six-pack. Oh, he has tattoos and he's in a band and he plays sports. And I didn't really care for a long time that I wasn't seeing any like serious brain activity going on. I'm not saying they had to read like massive tomes and like all of the great Pulitzer Prize winning books. I just wanted to see them read something. They'd pick a genre, anyone. So yeah, I struggled a lot with dating non-readers and being labeled a book freak and being treated like there was something wrong with me, with my brain. You know, I was fun to be around behind closed doors, but I was socially unacceptable because, I don't know, they seemed to take offense to me having all these stories in my head. And I am not the type of person to go around and lord it over people of what I've read, because there are a lot of books I haven't read, and you're probably going to think of something that you've read that I haven't. And so, you know, when I read books, it's just for me. It's just for my personal betterment. And I have this channel because I like sharing my thoughts with you guys, but I don't go out in social situations and name drop and make other people feel bad if they haven't read it. This is kind of a detour off topic, but one of the things that drives me crazy about some Booktube videos is when people say, if you haven't read this, what have you been doing with your life? Living? Going out and experiencing things? I mean, there's a hell of a lot of books to get to. It takes time. People are going to have stuff that they haven't gotten to yet. So I don't know, just that phrase of like, where have you been all your life? What have you been doing with your life? Like, enjoying it, thanks, at my own pace. Sorry, detour, but that just came to mind. But yeah, until I met my husband, it was something I really struggled with. And right before I met him, I was thinking, you know what, I'll be good just to live by myself in my books. At that point, I was thinking I would really rather just live by myself than have to feel like I have to justify something that feeds my soul. It's like everybody has something that makes them feel centered and feel like there's something that they can grasp onto that makes sense. Whatever it is, if it's reading books, if it's working on cars, even if it's just doing yoga or sitting under a tree under your yard, everybody has something they do that makes them feel centered. Or if you don't have that yet, there's something out there. Just keep looking for it. Figure out what gives you that feeling. But yeah, that's my thing though. I've always had a certain level of social anxiety. I can do small groups of people, and if I'm in bigger groups, I can fake it and be like I'm okay, but when I get home, I'm kind of a wreck inside because I'm like, there were so many people. A lot of that, I think, stems from the fact that I feel like a lot of my childhood I was socially ostracized for having all these books around me and being marked the book weirdo. And it's weird because I got heavily into books because I felt like I wasn't being allowed in socially with kids I grew up with. But the more I got into books, the more I was ostracized. So it's just this vicious circle I got into. And I feel like that carried into my dating life. It's like I started dating guys that were like, oh, and we get told, oh, you're so pretty, you're so funny, and you have all these interesting things to talk about. And I'm like, well, where do you think that came from? Books. It wasn't just born in there. I didn't come out of the womb with all that in there. I had to put it in there. But for some reason, actually physically seeing me read a book freaked him out. And to this day, I don't understand why there are so many people that are weirded out by that. I mean, it's not a weird thing for book lovers, but people that don't read, for some reason, they take offense to it, or I don't know, you like make them uncomfortable with reading around them, which is just weird to me. I don't know. But when I met my husband, though, so when he met me, he had no issue with my books, and it was like, oh. He thought it was really cool that I had so many books and I read so many different genres. Even if I'm reading a genre that he doesn't really get into, like he's mentioned that he doesn't get heavily into fantasy because he said his brain just doesn't work that way. His brain doesn't go to made up lands that well and really get immersed in that, because it's just, there's so much of a scientific side to his brain that it just wants to make logical sense out of fantasy. And he said he just can't get those two sides to work. And so he struggles with doing a lot of really out there fiction, but he is very entertained when I explain these worlds to him and what's going on. And so he kind of learns the stories through me, and I tell him things that I read and things that made me think, and even if it's not a genre he's into, he still has a way of bringing what he does know to the conversation. Like he mentioned one time I was talking about the argument between having a book that's in a nice cover versus what's inside, and he gave his view as like, oh yeah, it's like when you buy a car, whether you're buying a really awesome car for the way it looks, but you know it has a shitty engine, but it feels badass, or if you buy the reliable sedan, even though it it looks really crappy, you know it's always going to be there for you, and it's always going to get you where you need to go. And I was just like and he does that stuff all the time, where he can take his scientific mechanical brain and find some way to find a common ground with what I'm talking about with some random fictional thing I'm reading. So it is a really nice, comfortable place to be with a reader. I think for me, it's nice to have a reader, but I think for me, it's more like having someone who just encourages that interest. They don't necessarily have to be a reader themselves. I think the difficulty I ran into before was that I was dating non-readers who didn't give a shit about what I was reading. And I think it makes a big difference whether you're a reader or not if you just give a shit. And like, at least, make a small effort to hear them out, because if you care about the person, you want to hear their thoughts about things. You want to see what they get excited about. You want to see where their passions lie and where their heart is. And, you know, my husband has mentioned to me that he may not always understand the book thing, but he gets tickled seeing me so excited about a book haul, or, you know, having an afternoon to just get lost in a bookstore and coming back and being like, look what I found, and having that little kid look on my face. Because he does the same thing when we go to car shows, or, you know, if we go vintage toy shopping or something like that. If he gets to see any of those things, he does the same thing because that's his passion. And while I don't understand it all the time, because, you know, I'll admit I know diddly about most cars, other than I pick up some things just from listening to him so much, which is what happens to him. I have more car knowledge in my head than I ever did before I met him. But it's still not a lot, but it's a hell of a lot more than I started with. Just because I encourage his interests, and I watch a hell of a lot of Top Gear, a lot more than I ever did before. And so, you know, that stuff gets sort of absorbed in there. I go to a lot of car shows with him, and so he does the same thing with me. Even if he doesn't get it, he will go to bookstores with me, and he'll let me pilfer through a million clearance racks, and then he'll ask me, you know, what is exciting about this one, or what does your interest stem from, or you know, just out of the blue he'll ask me, hey, have you heard anything new about that author you were really into, or how's that book coming along? You know, just the effort, I think, is what makes it so awesome. Whether books are your thing or not, it's just making the effort to make the person feel important. So yeah, those are my thoughts on dating a non-reader. So yeah, and I probably repeated a lot of what other people were saying, but I just figured I'd, you know, this being a booktube channel, I should share some of my experiences with that. But yeah, reader or not, I still stand by what John Waters said. If you don't see books in their house, don't do it. That's it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.